Welcome everyone to the second part of the BCS Security Series. Last week, we covered off some of the threats that end users will face on a daily basis when using the internet. We went over what phishing was and gave some pointers on how to identify spam emails. We also covered some statistics which showed how in fact emails were the cause of most companies' pain. If you haven't listened to it yet, I encourage you to do so, as it ties in with this week's episode on MFA. We are going to cover off how to better secure your accounts so that if you are breached, this will help minimize the damage that can be caused. With MFA, this will give you quite a thick layer to that onion that we were talking about last week. I'm Lee Hutton, and I'm one of our senior remote engineers. And I'm joined again by my colleague, Khan Tomlinson, who is our systems administrator.
Hi, everyone.
For those of you who don't know, I cover some of the fallout that happens if a breach occurs. I try and sort of rectify accounts and repair damage, whilst Khan maintains and implements the security features across our network and keeps them, as I said, updated, keeps on top of that. As with the same as last week, you should see a Q&A section to ask any questions that you may have, and we'll go over these at the end. In this session, our main topic that we'll be covering is MFA, which stands for Multifactor Authentication. We will also cover where MFA can be used, and we'll give a demonstration of MFA in action. We will go over some of the password hygiene techniques that you should use and why this is important to do so. We're also going to cover some of the more common authentication applications and how they can be used in conjunction with MFA. We will discuss what complications can arise from using MFA. And finally, we'll go over some of the ways to help protect your data. Once again, thank you for joining me. Today's topic is going to be a little bit more technical, but please bear with me, and I hope that you'll get some valuable information from what we're going to cover today. Firstly, let's look at what is MFA, aka multi-factor authentication, and how does it work, and how can this benefit and protect your network and company. Multi-factor authentication is an authentication method in which a computer user is granted access only after successfully presenting two or more pieces of evidence to an authentication mechanism. These pieces could be based around knowledge, something that the user and only the user should know, possession, something that the user and only the user has, and inherence, which is something that the user and only the user is. We'll go on to some examples of those shortly. You may have also heard of the term two-factor authentication, or 2FA for short. You've probably seen this on websites in maybe account settings. It's a very commonly used term and is in fact quite often interchanged with MFA, where 2FA is to bring two factors of authentication. MFA is to give 2+, so 3, 4, etc. Two-factor authentication is a subtype of multi-factor authentication. It is a method of confirming the user's claimed identity by using a combination of two different factors. First being something they know, second something they have, and third something they are. Some examples could be a password and a push notification sent to your smartphone to approve the sign-in request, or a password and a hardware token, such as a card. You may have seen this when visiting a doctor's or hospital. You may see it around his neck, plugged into his keyboard, and then when he leaves his machine, it locks. It will also do the same to unlock. Two-step verification or two-step authentication is another method of confirming a user's identity by utilizing two things that fall under the same factor, which is something they know. Some examples could be that you would have to type in a password and a passcode, or a password and a booking number. These are both stored at the other end and can be compromised. So that these are both stored on the server side that you're accessing, so that you can authenticate against. That being said, two-step is generally less secure than MFA, but it is still better than nothing. Khan and I were discussing two-step authentication, and a one-time passcode, although can fall under something that you have, i.e. going to your device, because these are often sent out by email or text, SMS, but these can also be intercepted. So therefore takes that actual need for the physical possession of a separate device. So therefore they do still come under something they know, and is not, sorry, it doesn't say that it's more sort of, it's still two-step authentication, not two-factor authentication.
I would say that it depends how big the attack is, really. I mean, if they are really determined to be you know, you can assume that they've already got access to your text, or they've got access to your email. So it's sort of one of them. If they've already got access to them, then the 2FA two-step authentication is as good as not being enabled.
Yes, which ties in nicely with last week where we spoke about spear phishing and how much data people can get about you without even compromising your account in the first place, just by using social media and phoning you up, talking to you. So
definitely.
I know that we mentioned some of these earlier, but let's go over some of the factors that would make up multi-factor authentication. First one being something you have, some form of physical object that you have with you, such as a hardware token, a smartphone, a key card. There are lots, to be fair, many more. Something you know. This is certain knowledge that's only known to the user, such as a password, a PIN, some form of memorable data. Something you are. These are physical characteristics based around you, i.e. your biometrics, your fingerprint, your eye, your voice, even things like how you type and the speed. Somewhere you are. This is based on GPS location. So this is known as geofencing. This could be your computer, your physical computer you use for work, or laptop. Yeah. So where possible, please use more than one factor of all these authentication methods. Some websites are still using two-step authentication, which, as we said earlier, is not as secure, but it is better than just a plain password protecting the account. As you can see, there are a few extra factors of authentication that can be leveraged that is not just a password. As we mentioned last week, security is about layering, so that if something fails, there should be a fallback to cover that failure, a safety net as such. Some sites and services will even ask for an MFA code when trying to reset your password. So this gives the extra layer that if your account was compromised, then this would be a safety net to where the attacker cannot start resetting passwords of other sites and services that you use. We mentioned last week that if someone had access to your email inbox, they could probably quite quickly find out what sites you visit and where you possibly have accounts, and they could potentially reset those passwords because the password reset would go to your inbox. They could read, they could then start changing passwords on other sites you visit. Over to you, Carm.
Thanks, Dave. So even with MFA enabled, doesn't mean you should be complacent or careless with passwords. It's just another tool. It's just another layer. We come across people daily, even people without MFA. They're very basic passwords, and they reuse the same password for various other services. Or quite often they'll just add, it will be a word and it have an exclamation mark on the end, or have a number and they just increment it each time. You can see there that 9.5 billion usernames and username passwords are on the dark web. So if your password has been breached and it is available on the dark web, in theory, that can be used, or they can use that and guess that they'll know to work through those increments. They'll know to add punctuation to it, and they'll probably be able to guess your new password fairly quickly. If one of those passwords does happen to be for an email account, that can be used as a gateway to access your other accounts. Your email account is quite often the fail-safe. If you forget your password, you can reset it. It will send you a reset email. If they already have access to your email account, in theory, they can go and give themselves access to other accounts at will without even knowing the rest of your passwords. They'll also try your credentials across multiple services, which is why you shouldn't reuse a password twice. So if there's been a big breach, you'll see your password and they'll just try that username and combination amongst, across other services, and they'll get lucky because most people do reuse passwords. You can see on the screen there some big breaches include MySpace in 2008. It's going back a bit, but it's still relevant. MySpace were a big company. Everyone had a MySpace account. It was probably bigger than Facebook at the time. It had 260 million credentials stolen. If someone was reusing those credentials elsewhere, they're in trouble. Equally, if they use a very, very similar password, like as I've mentioned, hackers know to use variations of certain words or certain passwords. In 2012, Dropbox had tens of millions of credentials stolen. 2016, Dailymotion, which is a popular video sharing website, a bit like YouTube, and that had 85 million user accounts stolen. And the one that you probably are aware of most recently is in 2018, MyFitnessPal had 144 million username and password combinations exposed.
Just to follow on from that, we've actually seen emails that people get saying, "I know your password, it's this," and we've also seen other emails circulating about these leaks. And also one that people aren't probably more aware is, that's not a big named. There was sorry, excuse me. Sorry about that. In January last year, a large credentials of credentials that have been leaked into these websites from these phishing attacks. There was actually 2.7 billion records with 773 million unique email addresses and passwords that was done. That's not a named brand like MyFitnessPal, but this data is floating around all the time.
Just a collection of credentials just dumped out there on the internet.
Yep.
For people to pick up and try, and it's not even manually. They automate this stuff, so it's no effort for them. They just load up a bit of software and it goes off and tries all these credentials, and they'll get lucky eventually. Just moving on to the next slide. So we're going to just discuss password hygiene, and the next slide, creating a secure password. So the most basic tool you can use to help your passwords is a password manager. A password manager allows you to use individual randomly generated passwords that you don't have to remember for each of your services. You only need to remember the master password for the password manager itself. You should never write this password down nor share it with anyone else. Businesses can also use the password managers to share common passwords for services and accounts with other staff, with the added benefit of auditing to see who accessed the account and when. But password managers are key for you should be using a separate password for every single one of your logins. The only password you should have to remember, so the only two passwords you should have to remember, is for your password manager and your PC login.
I think we were talking earlier that although people shouldn't share passwords in some business scenarios, that is unavoidable.
Yeah, unfortunately, I mean, we have to do it internally as well. As much as we don't want to do it, some products we just, we have to. So we use our password manager to share it, limit access to it, so only particular members who need access to it can access it. And also, like I say, it's fully audited, so we can see who's accessed it at what time. So this slide is just about creating a strong password. So as I just mentioned, you'll need to remember 2 passwords: your PC login, because the password manager isn't going to help you there, and also the password manager itself. If you're locked out your password manager, you're in trouble. So it definitely has to be rememberable. We would recommend using a passphrase instead of a password. This is because passphrases are longer and they're harder to hack, but they're still rememberable. We would recommend you use a combination of 3 sort of unusual, uncommon words, such as names of local businesses, historical figures, and any words you know in another language, perhaps. We got an example there we just made up earlier: Shakespeare, Churchill, and bonjour. That won't fulfill a lot of criteria. For certain websites now, your PC login, the chances are you're going to need a special character in there, and or a number. So for extra security, we would recommend you add a special character, and actually for maximum security, add a number as well. I put and or there, but actually I'd recommend you do both, as in the example beneath, or we've just done Shakespeare hash Churchill 10 bonjour. That's not too difficult to remember, especially if you can relate it to local things. So I was thinking a Shakespeare pub, Churchill was in Winston Churchill, lived at number 10, and bonjour, one of the foreign words I know. I think it's one of the foreign words most people know, but it's just an example of how you can construct one of these passwords that you're going to remember, but is really, really difficult to guess. And it's also hard for a machine to crack that because of its length. We would recommend that you don't put personal information in the password, such as your name, children's names, pets' names, or date of births. This information can be obtained from social media. If there's been a targeted attack against you in the past, chances are they know this stuff. So you do want to make it that, and that's why we've mentioned above that you do sort of uncommon words or bizarre words, stuff that doesn't mean anything, but stuff that you're going to be able to remember, and stuff that people can't guess.
Just don't add Shakespeare 1, Shakespeare exclamation. The robots will guess those.
Exactly, definitely. And even if you start replacing characters like an E with a 3, if you think Shakespeare and you just replace the E's with 3s and add an exclamation mark on it, it knows to try them as well. It knows what the common variations of certain dictionary words are, and it will trial them. And that's why you need the combination. 3, because it's not too long, and you can remember it. Otherwise, if you end up going with like 5 words, it's just going to be very, very long. And some services, unfortunately, won't let you have a password that's too long, which is wrong, I think, because they should be encouraging a strong password. But I think that's a sort of good middle ground, 3 words. So this table has been taken from the National Cybersecurity Centre, a government body. They sort of work with GCHQ, so they work with the cybersecurity. They analysed credentials found on the dark web and produced this table to show popular password types. I thought it was quite interesting. So you can see there that on the dark web, they found 23 million instances of people using 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I don't know why people think that's a good idea to use in this day and age, but apparently 23 million people have, and have had that breached. Again, some people have added 789 on the end, 7 million of them. QWERTY, password has been used, and a string of 1s down there 3 million times. You can see in the sort of second column you've got a list of popular names there. Ashley's been used 432,000 times, and you've got Michael, Daniel, Jessica, Charlie. You've got Premier League football teams. Most people have a football team they support. It's the most popular sport in the country. And as you can see there, people are using Liverpool. They're one of the more widely supported teams, as is Chelsea, Arsenal. Man United are quite low on that list, I suspect, because there's different ways of typing it. You've got Manchester United. You might just have United. So, but you can see there, football teams are obviously quite a common choice, as are musicians. Blink-182, 50 Cent. You also got fictional characters on the right-hand side. So you really want to steer clear of this sort of stuff. Again, people can get this data from the dark web. The hackers have this data from the dark web. They'll have libraries of these credentials and all the variations of them. So just because you have Ashley of a capital A, you know, and you change the E out for a free exclamation mark at the end, it will try that as part of trialing Ashley. So just because you change it up slightly, that doesn't mean you're safe from these sorts of attacks.
That's what people do. They see Ashley and they think, well, I need to change it now because it's not secure. I'll put a capital A and I'll put a 3 where the E is, and I'm done.
You may well just not change it.
Yeah, 100%.
So I'm just going to hand you back over to Lee to continue talking about MFA.
Thanks, Khan. Now we know how to create a strong password. Let's go on to where MFA can be deployed to strengthen the security of your accounts. As mentioned earlier, you are probably already using some form of MFA. You will find that most sites and services will allow MFA to be enabled of some form. For instance, I cannot even log into my PayPal account without typing a generated code from my authenticator on my phone. That goes for including sending money and buying stuff through eBay or through PayPal. I have to give it a code every single time I want to use PayPal. In the workplace, MFA can be deployed for users to log onto their machines, a bit similar to the card reader that we was talking about earlier with the doctors, or fingerprint scanner. Quite a few laptops have fingerprint scanners on them, especially business laptops. We will actually have a demonstration of logging onto a machine with a push notification shortly. Office 365 is one of the biggest platforms for business use in the world, and this also can have MFA enabled on your accounts, and you should do. This will be the one that protects your emails the most, including other services and Office services like SharePoint. It's protecting all your data. Not many people know this, but you can also secure your VPNs with MFA, so that if you're in a CAF, you know that when you go to use the VPN, you'll type in the MFA code on top, and at least you know that that's you, and the business will know that it's you coming into the network. Whereas if MFA wasn't enabled and your account was compromised, attackers might try and VPN access into your company, and this will give direct access to users, to files and data that you have direct access to. So at least with MFA on VPNs, you know that it's a lot more secure. Other places such as online banking, shopping websites will also utilize MFA. And to be fair, most places that hold sensitive data will have implemented some form of MFA over the recent years. Some sites or services will also allow more than 2 factors of authentication of the same factor. So you can choose which one you would want to log in with. So say, for instance, on the Office accounts, you can have a device, you can have a telephone number that you can be phoned on. You can also set it MFA to have all 3 factors used. So you have to pass all 3 factors of authentication before you can access anything. Enabling MFA on your accounts is normally a very simple and quick process. You've probably seen the QR codes on websites, or just in general. They can hold data that cameras can read. The most common factor that's being used here is something you have. Some methods of authentication that can be delivered to you are, we could go over one-time passwords, shortened to OPT. You might see these again in website settings. These are delivered by email or text or SMS. And being due to emails and text potentially being compromised or intercepted, this is slightly a grey area due to negating the need for that physical device. Again, better than nothing. We've got time-based one-time passwords, which these are delivered by a mobile app or hardware token. This is also covered by something you have. These will generally make a code based every 30 seconds, just based on time and possibly a serial number on the back of the device. We've got push notifications. These are delivered automatically to your mobile application, which we'll go on to talk about next. Some of the more common examples of mobile applications is the Microsoft Authenticator. This is a free application that you can use to secure your Microsoft products. You will also find that you can secure other sites and services as well with this. To be fair, all of the ones I list below will cover other sites and services which are outside of the Microsoft platform. This will, if you're using the Microsoft Authenticator, you will get push notifications to your mobile device when you try and log into something. The Google Authenticator, similar to the Microsoft application, but this doesn't grant push notifications. It's more of an authenticator. It's used to generate those codes so that you can secure your sites and services. Authy is another one. It does the same as Google Authenticator. It can sync to other devices and just generally secure sites and services that you use. You've got Duo Mobile. This is our preferred method. This ties in with the workplace environment really well, which, yeah, it's an all-round. It does everything. This is on top of it being tied to the workplace. This is actually controlled centrally and is managed and logged centrally. You can set up. Sorry.
I was going to say it's convenient for the user.
Yes.
Duo is centrally controlled. You set it up. The user doesn't have to do multiple QR codes. It can be handled at a sort of admin level.
We're not putting that burden onto the users and actually expecting them to actually go ahead and do it, sort of thing. It's done for them.
Yeah, definitely. There are some limitations in that Duo doesn't work with every service out there, but it's got quite a long list of services it is natively compatible with.
Their line of business applications. So we use, as well, I was just about to go on to next, we do use Duo to tie in to our services that we use internally in the company. So some of our tools we use, Duo ties in nicely with that. So when a user logs in to use, when we log into work to use our tools, we get push notifications automatically to our phone. We haven't had to set anything up. That was Khan's job, and all we had to do was get it on our device. We do know that using a mobile device is not always possible. Some people don't want to. Some people prefer to use hardware tokens because it's not on their phone. On your screen, starting with the left image, is just a standard generic hardware token. It generates the codes every 30 seconds. So you'll type your password into a website. It will ask you to type in the code. You'll have 30 seconds to type that code in. If for whatever reason you fail to type it in with those 30 seconds, you'll probably get declined to log in because you haven't passed that authentication method. You'll have to start again. The HSBC token on the right, it would normally ask you to supply it with a code. So you type that in on the digit on the keypad. It will then give you a PIN to type into the HSBC Bank website to log in. Another form of card reader for banks is a card reader itself, where you can plug the card, slide the card in, you type your PIN in, you then get generated a code on the screen. You type that into the website that you need it to. After setting up multi-factor authentication, there can be complications that you probably should be aware of. The main one being, to be fair, this is pretty much the biggest one, is what if I lose my device, or what if I left it at home? When the user enables MFA on their account, they would normally have to put in a phone number as a different way of authenticating yourself. Similar to when you sign up to services, you might have another email address where you could get code sent to if yours was compromised or you didn't have access to it anymore. It's the same with MFA. You can set up different ways of authenticating you against their services. So for instance, if you left your phone at home, you can choose to sign in a different way when you're trying to access services online. And then you would have it set up for your work phone would ring. You would get a call. An automated service will say, press this. You press this key if it was you. Don't press it if you weren't expecting it. And then it would let you to sign into that service. If you was to use Duo, it goes slightly above this in the fact that the administrator can actually give out a temporary code to sign in with. So you can carry on with your day just by the code that you're given. Hopefully you get your device sorted, go home, get your device. But at least there's a code there that you could just type in. It will override. It will allow you to carry on working. Now let's go over a couple of the demos of how a MFA is protecting your account.
Thanks, Dave. So yeah, we've just done a couple of demonstrations. We pre-recorded them. We just want to quickly go through logging onto your PC and logging into Office 365. They're quick. It's more just to demonstrate the sort of simplicity of it. So we'll just play through this first one of a workstation login. So this could be, a user logging in the morning. They pop in their password, hit enter. It then pops up with the Duo prompt. They've now got a notification on their phone. They click into the notification. It pops up asking them if they want to approve or deny the request. The user in this case will approve it. It then continues and logs them in. If they hit reject, it won't sign them in. It will kick them back out to the log on screen. It will be logged as an unauthorized login attempt, and the admin will get an email to say that there's been an unauthorized admin login attempt, so that then they can investigate, work out where it comes from. It'll be logged with IP address, and then it will. You can then take action based on that to change the password if it's relevant. It might be the user's doesn't need to log on anymore, so they've hit no, but it just enables it to be investigated further. Because what you don't want is people logging on, and you don't know they've logged on. This is a great way. It stops them gaining access, and you know that they've been blocked.
So if your email was compromised, you would get one of these notifications, and you would think, "Oh, that's not me."
Definitely, it gives you a chance to. It just gives you, and it's another. It's another notification step basically that could alert you to someone in your account. And then we go on to the next slide. You can see here, this is what the notification looks like on the phone. So the notification comes up, you click into it, you're then given the choice, do you want to approve or deny? One of the things actually I should mention, if you happen to have an Apple Watch, Duo do also do an app for that. So you can literally just tap accept on your wrist. I know there's a couple of people in the office that use that, and it really is convenient. But I mean, worst case, you pull out your phone, you accept it. It really isn't a big deal. And it does keep your account secure. So going on to the Office 365 demo, Microsoft do have 365 natively, but I'm going to demonstrate again the Duo one just because it all pieces together. So we'll play that. You'll see the user enter their username. But then enter their password. And again, if this was a hacker doing this exact same thing, they would experience the same thing. They would get to this next page, which is a Duo prompt saying, how do you want to authenticate? You've got the choice of a push notification, to call, or enter a passcode. The passcode will be on the phone already. You can call and answer, or you can do a push notification. You can also tick that box to remember you for 4 hours. So it means if you log into any other services that are Duo protected on that PC within the next 4 hours, you won't have to re-authenticate because it uses a cookie. That cookie has got an expiration time of 4 hours on it, but it just means when you can log into everything in the morning, and you won't have to keep authenticating yourself. And again, you can see that the prompt that comes through is more or less the same. You can see it's Azure AD, which is Office 365 sort of authentication backend. You've got the user account here, Learning Zone Demo. You can then see the IP address the login attempt was made from, where it was made from, and the time. And again, that's presented to you as a user on your phone. So if you're out the office and all of a sudden you get this pop up on your phone, you know that someone's trying to log into your account they shouldn't. You can hit deny, the admin will be alerted and they can take action. Probably what you want to do as well is alert your IT help desk as well, that you've just had some sort of unknown login attempt, alert your IT provider, and then they can have a look for you as well. Don't just rely on the notification, even though it does happen. You know, if you've got concerns, you do need to let your IT team know, because if you didn't make that login attempt, someone else did. chances are it wouldn't be from England either. It would be from some far off country. Okay, so MFA helps protect your accounts, but there are other ways of protecting your data as well. MFA is a large part of your account security, but there are other steps. So here you've got using a VPN to access internal services and documents. This reduces the attack surface. It encrypts the traffic from your laptop to your servers. So in the event that someone was spying on your data, whether you were out on the public Wi-Fi or even at home that someone had access to your home network, they can't see what's being transmitted from your laptop. If you were unencrypted and the password was plain text, it's quite rare now, but if it was a plain text password, in theory, they could actually see that password when they're inspecting the data from your laptop. So VPNs are crucial for accessing internal services, and also it's a way of locking down services. It's harder with cloud nowadays. A lot of stuff's cloud-based, and it's just the way it is. But especially if you've got something hosted internally, if you can turn off the external facing side of it, it means you have to VPN in to get to it. So it just helps the security. Spam filter on emails. This goes back to the webinar last week. Phishing emails are the #1 cyber threat to a business by far. There was a graph last week that showed that. People even voted to say that they had experienced breaches off the back of a phishing email or malicious email that come through. So spam filtering is by far one of the biggest things you can do to help protect your network and your users. You've got antivirus. This will help protect your device against the malicious destruction of data through a virus, but it also helps protect against spyware. Spyware will sit on your PC and try and steal data from you. So an example of that would be a keylogger. A keylogger would sit there as you go onto a website. You're typing your passwords, your credentials into a legitimate website. In the meantime, it's basically recording your keyboard, and it sends those details off to a hacker or malicious database somewhere, and then those credentials can then be used to obviously log into the same service that you were logging into. You would want antivirus on there to block that, and all the antivirus software do block software like that. So the next one on the list is DNS web filtering. Some of you and our customers would see webroot DNS on your PC. This protects end users from potentially accessing malicious websites in the first place. So in the event that an email did get through the spam filter and it did have a malicious link, it does happen. They're not 100% foolproof. This is another layer that would help protect against that. If the user clicked that link, in theory, the DNS web filtering would then capture it. DNS is like a phone book for websites, and there are lists out there of bad websites, and especially when these blanket attacks go out, and they know what sort of domains, what web addresses are used in phishing campaigns, they'll go onto a blacklist. So the second the user clicks that email, it goes off to the DNS server, the phone book for websites, and it will then tell the PC that's a bad website, and it will block you from getting to it. So DNS web filtering is definitely important. You've got RMM tools. So RMM tools are used. We use an RMM tool called Automate, ConnectWise Automate. It may be used by your internal IT departments. They monitor the PC for all sorts of stuff. It stands for Remote Monitoring and Management. It will monitor patching. It will monitor disk space, the health of the PC, all sorts of stuff. But one of the things it also does is monitor running services and processes on your PC. So that is another thing on top of your antivirus. That's another tool that can monitor the stuff that's running in your PC and alert you to something malicious. It has its own database of processes or services that it knows comes from viruses, and it will flag it. It will kill the process. It will raise a ticket to us or your IT department, and will say, this is bad. You need to look into why this is run. We've killed the process, but you need to go and clean it up. You then got firewalls. So firewalls can be used to block malicious payloads from entering your network. You've got UTMs, Unified Threat Management. They're sort of like next generation firewalls. They inspect the data on the way into your network and on the way out if it's configured. But in particular, we're focusing on the way in. The data comes into the network. It reads the data and can then make a decision as to whether or not that data should be coming into your network. it will then block suspicious files from coming in. They can be, you can just block malicious content, you can block particular file types, but that's just another step you can take to protecting your network. If you're connected via a VPN, and that VPN is what we call full tunnel, so all the traffic gets routed through the VPN. So you're accessing the internet gets routed to your office. The firewall will also protect that data as well. So if you want to protect your users when they're out of the office, the best thing you can do is a full tunnel VPN, because then all of your traffic is routed from their laptop through the office, through the protection you've got at the office, and then out to the internet. And when it comes back in through the office and back to the laptop. And the connection between the laptop, as I mentioned earlier, and to the VPN server or the firewall is encrypted. So that's one of the biggest steps you can make. You then got patching. You want to make sure your Windows operating system and your software is up to date. I say Windows, you've got Mac as well, and Linux, whatever you may be using, mobile phones. You need to make sure you're on the latest version. Software gets exploits. Companies like Google, Microsoft, they pay people to test their software. They pay people to deliberately try and hack their software and find exploits before the bad guys get to it. When they find these exploits, or they're alerted to exploits, they'll patch it, and then the user then installs that patch, and then they're safe from that known vulnerability. Every software's got vulnerabilities within it. You want to make sure you're on the latest build to minimize the chance that you're going to have a exploit exploited, basically. And then you've got training. As we discussed last week, training is one of the biggest security measures you can take. Humans, users, are the weakest part of your network security. You can have all the layers you want, but if a user's going to click something, even though you've got all those layers, like I say, nothing's foolproof. That's why you layer it up, in the chance that one of those layers is going to catch it, but nothing's 100%. So the best thing you can do is train your users. You can, your IT provider may offer services such as cybersecurity training and awareness courses. You can also do simulated phishing attacks. They will send spoof phishing emails out to your users, so they'll look legitimate, but the user will then, if they're not careful, they'll click the link, they'll enter their password into this fake Office 365 website. The website won't then collect those details, because obviously you're using a legitimate service, but it's to see which users are most vulnerable, which users are actually going to click that link and enter their credentials. You can then target training at those users. You want them to click your link in your safe phishing email, your pretend phishing email, then you want to get to them first before they click an actual phishing email. So training is education, definitely the biggest one. Yeah, 100%. Education's key. So I'm just going to hand you over to Lee to run through the conclusion.
Cool, thanks, Khan. So before I conclude on today's webinar, before we take any questions, I'd just like to let you know that if you do need anything clarified, you want any information on any services that we can provide you, or just to go through a security package that may be bespoke to yourself, because not everyone needs everything, but people need, that everyone's different. You can email us at education@bcs365.co.uk. And just to finalise, I think we've covered it. Passwords are just no longer good enough to be the only security to your data. They're weak. They're just, MFA is pretty essential to help protect your data. I know we covered some of the differences between MFA, 2FA, and two-step. You would rather be using MFA and 2FA, but two-step if there's no other option. And don't forget, the password is really no good to an attacker without having access to your phone or your hardware device that you're using to help give you those one-time codes that you need to log into websites. Yes, so you hear me, Khan, saying this quite regularly, but security is about layering, and that really is true. It's about getting protection in place for preventing rather than cleaning up.
That's it. As many layers as possible. Just because you got one, just because you pay for a firewall, Just because you got your antivirus, that isn't enough on its own. You definitely need to stack these products up.
Unfortunately, safety and convenience don't really go together. It's your data is so sensitive and secure to you that if you lost all your data for whatever reason, could your business function? Could you go on? It's just, but that's when you start thinking about backups, and there's so many layers to help protect your company that I think you should start looking into some more of them. And MFA is a really good start.
Definitely. Right, so we've got a couple of questions in already. If you've got any questions, feel free to ask them now. We'll just work through the questions that we've got so far. So Lee, we've got a question here. As a basic security measure for a business, what would you recommend as a standard we should have or should be using at a minimum? So I suppose in terms of firewalls, antivirus, what would sort of be the minimum for a company?
Well, all the machines need to be protected. So we need monitoring tools on antiviruses. We did.
Yep.
It depends. MFA obviously is a big must that we've just been speaking about.
MFA 100% for any sort of cloud accounts. Anything you can enable. Yeah, anything you can enable MFA on, enable it.
Get it on. And make sure they're bespoke passwords. Yep. Use that password manager.
It really depends on how much you value your data. If you don't value your data, then there's probably not much point. But most companies do value their data. So, I mean, I would say, yeah, definitely antivirus. You want an RMM tool, which obviously we provide. You'd want a firewall. You'd want a managed firewall to actually do that packet inspection on the way in. You'd want secure DNS or web DNS filtering. You would want that.
Training staff members is also
training, 100%. Spam filter. Office 365 does offer a basic spam filter. It's not the best, and you don't have too much control over it, frustratingly. So, spam filter is also a definite. And then, so we got another question here. I saw there was a recent breach this week reported as EasyJet. There was a breach of EasyJet. Basically, I'm not sure if you saw it in the news. And the viewer is asking, would you recommend that I should go and change my passwords and look at starting to implement MFA using Duo on my accounts? I would say yes, definitely.
Did you actually see that there was just over 2,000 credit cards and CSV numbers stolen as well?
Yes, you want to contact your bank.
Yeah.
You definitely want to. If you use EasyJet recently, EasyJet have said they're going to contact people in the next couple of days. It depends if you want to take that risk. If you know that you've given EasyJet your details, you want to take a chance you're in 2,500.
There was 9 million customers with just over 2,000 credit cards stolen, but that will also have a knock-on effect with phishing attacks. For those 9 million emails, you might get an email from EasyJet saying, or from EasyJet in quotes saying, "We've been breached, click here to reset your password," and you could actually just be going somewhere else, or it's just the actual fallout from this is severe.
Definitely. And also with the whole COVID-19 situation, they could exploit that as well, with flights being cancelled, and they now know a list of upcoming flights. In theory, that you could get a COVID-19 related email saying, "We've had to cancel flight, here's all your details, it is us, we got all this information, click here to give us your bank details to give you a refund," or something like that. So just keep an eye out. And yes, I would definitely say change your password if you've got an EasyJet account,
and go to your bank if you ever paid with your credit card detail on their site.
Yep. And also what's key, if you've reused that EasyJet password elsewhere, change them as well for definite.
So we got so how can I use the same authenticator application for personal and business uses?
Yes.
And the answer is yes. Like I said, we want you to have MFA on as many sites and services that you have, and you can use the same application for both. You can actually rename, and you can have a naming convention. So you could have personal PayPal, work PayPal. You can have the same on the same application.
We're coming at this from a business point of view, but for your personal accounts as well, there's no reason not to be using MFA.
You don't want to wake up one morning with someone spent lots of money on your PayPal. It's going to upset you, and it's going to
ruin your day.
been having a bad day.
Definitely.
Same with the company as well. You don't want the same there either.
Definitely not. And
And
we just got one more, Lee. How do we access the previous webinar?
yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I can take that one. I just email into education. It's on screen. education@bcs365.co.uk, and we can send you a link to that, and you can watch last week's. Like I said, it does tie in with this week. It was phishing related. Obviously, if you do get phished and they've got your credentials, and you don't have MFA, they're in your account. So MFA is the next step. You don't want to click a phishing email in the first place, but if you did, worst case, and you had MFA, in theory, they wouldn't be able to do much because you had MFA. But it's all about layers. It's all about layers. So definitely watch the webinar from last week.
We've got another question, Con.
Okay.
I'm happy to take it. Can physical security also be classified as a type of multi-factor? For example, doors, locks, door entry readers, allowing users to get to their PC physically using their entry card with no form of VPN or remote access. And the answer is that it's an access, it's a form of control, a form of access control, not a factor authentication.
Yeah, I mean, if your network was to get breached and they had access to your PCs across the network, it doesn't matter what physical security you've got on it, they can potentially still gain access.
But you also do want physical access.
Physical is still
important.
Definitely,
it is important. You're right.
Again, it's layers.
Yes, it's those. Actually, I mean, we could go into a whole topic on physical security, I'm sure, as there's quite a lot to cover, and in fact, there's exams about it and bits and pieces. So, but
like physical security, especially for like your server room, it is important, and you can have multiple. You can have different layers of security. You could have like a card reader on the server room door and a physical key if you wanted to. You could layer it up from that approach, but logically, from a networking point of view, from a PC point of view, you still need your multi-factors for your PC, for your online accounts. Definitely physical security you can get around physical security, by hacking the network.
But again, that's why you have to have layers as well.
Exactly. That's why it's all about
for
layers.
physical people. I think the last question.
Yeah, we've got another one here about password manager. So if I use the password manager, can't their database be hacked? And then the attacker has a list of all the passwords and sites I use. It is possible. To say it's not impossible would be irresponsible, I think. That were.
But generally, they can't access the data.
They know the sort of data they're dealing with. They're a security firm. That is their business.
And that's why you need that big long password when you're actually setting the master password on your password manager.
Exactly, it's encryption.
Because that encrypts the data, so that even if, and this is, I was going to go into that a bit more next week, but as a downside to password managers, you must know that password, because although there are some recovery options, the company themselves won't be able to help you.
Because they can't see it. They don't know. You set the encryption password. They don't have access to it. So worst case, they can steal your hashed credentials in the event they happen to be breached, which is very, very unlikely. But in the event they were breached, it would be hashed credentials.
Which is the same as why you use a long password, because they are hashed and they will take a long time to break, even if a long password like the one the Shakespeare.
You would have enough time to change those passwords. If your password manager did get breached, we haven't had one. But in the event a password manager did get breached, it's encrypted. It's using a very, very high level of encryption. The time it would take to decrypt those passwords would be a long time. You would have time to go through and change those passwords.
And that's one each. I've got 700.
Yeah, it's all about risk. The risk of your password manager being hacked is less than the risk that would be involved, the chances of you being breached through an ununique credential. So in the event your password manager was hacked, that's a lesser risk than you using the same password for all your websites, because they're going to have less security. And if you've reused that password elsewhere and that password isn't unique, they potentially got access to your other services as well. So, and that's why the password manager is definitely the way to go. So does that help clear up that question? Was that clear enough? Because it's definitely a concern, and me and Lee were actually talking about it earlier with the encryption. So if we can do any more to explain that better, please let us know.
Whilst we're waiting for that to come in, we'd also, do you want to jump onto the next slide, Carl?
Yeah.
Just for some
So some kind viewer has actually sent us a link for LastPass, which is a form of password manager, and their sort of process behind it. So you can go and read further about the security measures that these companies take. If you're concerned, we use a product called Passportal, but there are all sorts of password managers out there. But yeah, I'll go on to the next slide.
As we're coming to the end of our last third session on this type of security, I think next week we're going over working from home and some of the difficulties that companies are facing, and making sure your data's safe whilst working from home. We'd also like some feedback and ideas that you might want for us to cover. And if you could email those to feedback@bcs365.co.uk, we'd be very grateful to hear what you've got to say.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, if there's something you want to say, let us know.
So.
And then finally, we just got the event, the webinar next week, same time, 27th, next Wednesday. Is your home network keeping your corporate data secure or leaving it exposed? So join us then. We'll just hold on, see if there's any other questions. Don't think there is. So if anyone does any further questions, email education@bcs365.co.uk and we'll get back to you on that. But if not, see you next week.